welcome to Her Story. Today we're very pleased to have with us Jill Tietjen from the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, New York. It's really exciting, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome to another episode. Today we are very pleased to have with us at the Maryland Women's Heritage Center Jill Tietjen, who is Vice President of the National Women's Hall of Fame based in Seneca Falls, New York, that very historic place where the suffragists had this first national convention. And we're so pleased that she's here with us in Baltimore today. Welcome, Jill.
Well, thank you. It's such a privilege to be here.
What we wanted to share today is the work that you're doing and what the National Women's Hall of Fame does, and also talk a little after that about your book, which is Her Story.
Yes.
And we are so thrilled about that because, as you know, our motto for the Maryland Women's Heritage Center is adding her story to his story to tell our story.
Well, I saw that when I was at the center today, and it's so wonderful for me. And I also saw the woman who is the catalyst for all of the work that I've done with the National Women's Hall of Fame.
And who is that?
And that's Admiral Grace Murray Hopper, who I nominated for the National Medal of Technology. I actually received it on her behalf from the first President Bush at the White House Rose Garden in 1991. And she was my first successful nominee to the National Women's Hall of Fame.
That's wonderful.
Which was in 1994.
Yes.
And I've been at every induction since 1994, and then I've been on their board of directors since 2009. And the National Women's Hall of Fame, for me, was just, it was an eye-opening experience to be at that first induction ceremony. I'm an electrical engineer. And as I say in my talks, including the talk I gave here in Baltimore yesterday, because I'm an electrical engineer, I didn't have time in my curriculum in college for women's studies or women's history. I didn't know about the Declaration of Sentiments. I vaguely knew about the Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, New York, the birthplace of women's rights, and the home of the National Women's Hall of Fame. But to see the Declaration of Sentiments on the water wall in Women's Rights National Park, and to understand what was going on and to understand the significance of women's contributions to history.
Yes.
So it's really been my pleasure to be affiliated with the National Women's Hall of Fame, now to be the vice president of the board of directors, and to believe that I have an ongoing role with the hall.
That's wonderful. And I know that after today, we will be the Jill Caucus in Women's Halls of Fame.
Well, as we discussed, there aren't very many Jills, so to have two of us at the same time is amazing. Admiral Hopper was also, as I said, the catalyst of my learning about historical women in science and technology, which then led to my learning about historical women in education as abolitionists, as suffragists, as politicians, in every walk of life, that then led to the publication of my book, which is called Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America. And as I actually mentioned to you a little bit earlier, that was not Charlotte's and my working title for the book, which was very similar actually to your tagline. Our working title was Weaving Her Story into History, because what you have here is that it's so important to add women's stories. Women are ignored.
And invisible.
They are invisible. They are forgotten. Their contributions are minimized. Women did amazing things that are very important, and we need to tell her story so that, you're right, it does become integrated into history so that it becomes our story, because the little girls and the little boys, as well as those of us that are a little bit bigger, also need to know that women contributed to history.
Yeah, and
not
I think
just
it's
men.
very inspiring for girls, and it's also very inspiring for boys who have mothers and grandmothers and aunts and sisters and ultimately become dads with daughters. And I think that they understand our motto of adding her story to his story to tell our story, that what we're about is making history complete, and it includes all of us, and that we're hopefully shaping a more equitable future.
Which, of course, is what we all want. And interestingly enough, I'm just thinking of some of the women that are here in your Maryland's Women's Hall of Fame, as well as in my book, and in the National Women's Hall of Fame. And you think about Rachel Carson,
Yes.
for example, and what she did with her book in 1962, Silent Spring, which is credited with leading to Earth Day in 1970, which is the renaissance of the entire
Environmental
movement.
Absolutely.
And that was a woman.
Yes.
And so it's important to understand that women made contributions. I saw Martha Causton over there.
Yes.
Martha Causton invented a signal flare. And I grew up in Hampton, Virginia,
Okay.
right on
But
the
there-
body of water called the Hampton Roads, which is where the Battle of the Monitor and the Merrimack were, and they used Martha Causton's flares, signal flares, during the Battle of the
But
Monitor.
certainly no one knew who had created those.
Absolutely not.
I just found out this past week that the person who initiated having curb cuts for people with disabilities and reserved parking spaces
For handicap.
for people with disabilities was also a woman. Had no idea. You don't ever think about that there's a genesis for things like that, for the flares or for the curb cuts. You kind of take them for granted once they're in use, but not to realize that a person initiated them, and to find out that in both cases it was a woman.
Absolutely. And you're reminding me of Lillian Muller-Gilbreth, the mother of 12, and we're familiar with her from Cheaper by the Dozen.
Absolutely, we know that.
And they had 12 children on purpose so that they could test their theories of industrial engineering. They're credited, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth are credited as two of the founders of the field of industrial engineering. When you see a trash can that has that foot lever on the bottom, that's Lillian Gilbreth. When you open your refrigerator and you see the meat drawer, and you see the humidifying drawers, and you see the egg holder, and you see the butter dish, that's Lillian Muller-Gilbreth.
And again, we take those things for granted in modern appliances, but we have no idea that it was initiated. Each of those things was initiated by a woman.
Exactly. One more example of a scientific and technical woman, Mary Engel Pennington, who was actually called the Ice Lady, because she went
love it.
around to markets in the late 1800s and early 1900s and encouraged the vendors to put their fish and eggs and poultry on ice to keep it sanitary.
And fresh.
People were dying from
Absolutely.
milk that spoiled and eggs that were not properly handled. She developed the egg carton.
Yeah.
And what I tell my audiences when I speak is that I have a homework assignment for them. And when they see their Thanksgiving turkey, they are to say, "Thank you, Mary Engel Pennington." She had 6 patents for the safe handling of milk, eggs, fish, and poultry. And she devised the
Exceptional.
refrigeration car that allowed food to be transported across the country. So where the turkeys were grown and then processed, they could then be shipped to our grocery
Safely.
stores.
Safely,
They could
finally.
be handled safely, processed safely, shipped safely, so we could have Thanksgiving turkeys.
Which is marvelous, and we're almost at Thanksgiving now.
And we're almost
We
at
have a lot to be
Thanksgiving now.
thankful for. I wanted to mention also, since you were talking about women who are in the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame and in the National Women's Hall of Fame, Rita Caldwell,
Absolutely.
who is a wonderful Maryland woman and who was the first and only woman to be head of the National Science Foundation. And she is really the international authority on waterborne pathogens and has received all kinds of international awards to help prevent similar kinds of disease to what you're citing here.
Right. Well, her story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, starts in 1587, goes now, the paperback, through 2011. There are over 850 women in the book, each of which has an image, actually a beautiful image. Our graphic designer was phenomenal, and a little discussion about their accomplishment. And something going back to something that you said earlier, it's not just the young girls and the young boys who find something of interest in it. So many women have said to me when they see the book that it actually provided them with validation to know that women had made these kinds of accomplishments. And we're talking everything from Grandma Moses, who started painting when she was 77, to Julia Taymor, who did the masks and the whole concept for The Lion King. So it's that range of accomplishments. From Virginia Dare, who was born in 1587 in what became North Carolina, through an amazing array of accomplishments. One of my favorites, and I have many favorites, in addition to Admiral
Almost
Hopper,
everyone in the book,
almost everyone is my favorite. In 2007, Drew Gilpin Faust became the first female president of Harvard University. Harvard University was founded in 1636. So it only took almost 400 years.
Well, speaking of the 1600s, I don't know if you included Margaret Brent in your
Margaret
book.
Brent is absolutely in my book.
Okay.
And I have a talk that I give where I talk about women's voting rights. And I talk about Margaret Brent because she actually petitioned the legislature in Maryland twice.
For 2 votes.
For votes. And of course,
one as a woman and one as a landowner. And she was, at the time, running our colony.
Exactly.
However, she was not permitted to vote. Let's take a little break now, and then we'll come back and talk some more.
Okay, that's good.
She said,
teleprompter.
I went to my first meeting at the White House as the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives. And I wasn't having any apprehension about the occasion because I'd been to the White House many times as an appropriator, as an intelligence committee person. So I didn't even think about being apprehensive. When I went to the meeting, the door closed behind me, and I saw the President, the Vice President, and the other leaders of Congress, House and Senate, Democratic and Republican. I realized that this was unlike any meeting that any woman had ever been to before in the White House. Not only me, but any woman. But I was there with not my presence there derived from the President's appointment, but as a representative of my caucus. And as I sat down, the President, George W. Bush, ever gracious and welcoming, while he was speaking, at my chair, I felt very, very closed in. Very, very closed in. I didn't know what was happening, and I could vaguely pay attention to what he was saying. And then I realized that sitting on my chair, Stanton, Lucretia, Alice Paul, Sojourner Truth, you name it. Imagine what the President must have been thinking at the time as I was squeezing in to make room for them and others. And then I could hear him say, at last we have a seat at the table.
welcome back. We're talking with Jill Tietjen, who is the Vice President of the National Women's Hall of Fame and the author of her story, which we hope everyone will want to go out and read. We certainly are going to. The Hall of Fame, some of us went there 2 years ago when our own state Senator Barbara Mikulski was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. And we have about a dozen Maryland women who are in the National Women's Hall of Fame, and most of them are also in our Maryland State Women's Hall of Fame. This year, there was one Maryland woman of whom we are very proud and who's very involved with our center, Dr. Bernice Sandler, who we call Bunny Sandler, and one who grew up in Maryland and whose family was very intimately involved in the politics of Maryland, Representative Nancy Pelosi, whose family includes mayors of Baltimore and every level of politics. So she went to California with a lot of experience. So although she's California inducted, she certainly grew up in our state. Could you talk a little more about the Hall of Fame induction, how these people are selected, and what that fabulous induction weekend is like?
The National Women's Hall of Fame has an induction ceremony now every 2 years on the odd years. About 10 women are inducted, some of whom are alive and some of whom are posthumous. And the selection criteria basically relate to the lasting significance of their areas of accomplishments. And what I have found, I've been at every induction ceremony since 1994. And they are one of the most inspiring events, and maybe the most inspiring event that I've ever been to be able to see the women who are alive, as well as the legacy
Yes.
of the women who are already deceased, and to understand, for example, this year I had nominated Emma Willard. Emma Willard's school is still in existence, the school that she established in Troy, New York in
Yes.
1821, when there weren't public schools available for girls, when girls didn't get educated.
It was unheard of at that time.
And for someone to go out and ask for money for a school in 1821, unbelievable. And the pride of the principal of the school, who's called the head of school, and the chair of the board of directors, who I had the opportunity to sit with, is just amazing. But each of the women who are inducted.
I want to go back to Emma Willard for a minute, because what's also important in your Hall of Fame for the nation and ours for our state is that these legacies carry forward, as you're saying. Her school is still there. But also, I think the kind of thing she did with education for girls is certainly topical right now with Malala from Pakistan, struggling for girls to get an education and having been shot because of wanting to have girls to have an education. So these legacies really carry through to the present day.
Absolutely. And one of the important things also with Emma Willard is that her school wasn't what we would today consider fluff. She wasn't teaching embroidery. She wasn't teaching sewing. She wasn't teaching cooking, of course, which are all important skills. She was actually providing an education for the girls, which was, quote unquote, equivalent to the kind of education that the boys were getting. And then that has obviously filtered down today to where the educational opportunities for women and men in the U.S.
Yes.
are equivalent. To see Julie Crone, the first woman jockey to win a Triple Crown race, and to hear her excitement about being inducted, and to see her 8-year-old daughter, who, in spite of herself at 8 years old, was being influenced by the fact that these were amazing women who were around and that her mother was being inducted.
Yes.
To hear Bunny Sandler speak.
The godmother of Title IX.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the National Women's Hall of Fame did a Title IX event last June in Washington, and Bunny Sandler was there as well.
And just so you know, I was one of the people who worked for the passage of Title IX, and we were there when it was passed in Congress. My son was 3 and was rattling around on the marble floors of Congress. You'd hear the little kids' shoes while they were taking the vote. We were up in the gallery. And our congresswoman at that time was Gladys Noon Spellman, for whom the Baltimore-Washington Parkway is dedicated to her memory, because she helped preserve that. But you'll love this story. I'm not sure if we have it recorded anywhere else, but I tell it often because being there on the day that the House of Representatives went to vote for Title IX, one of the Southern representatives a male, was standing at the door and really seriously trying to frighten them and saying, if you vote for this, your daughters are going to have to shower with the boys. And Gladys Noon Spellman, knowing this vote was important, decided to diffuse what he did, and she stationed herself on the other side of the same door, and she said, right, and it's retroactive, you'll get to shower with the girls. And it made it as silly as that accusation was, and it passed by a large majority. But I think sometimes it's important, they'll say often the women's movement had no sense of humor. She was living proof that humor helped pass Title IX.
Yes, that was really wonderful and, of course, very important.
Yes, and it brings us back to why your book is so important and why we really want to know a little more about it and hopefully encourage people to read it and learn more about her story.
Well, thank you. Her story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, profiles, and I guess that's the appropriate word, more than 850 women in U.S. history from 1587 and now that the paperback is out through 2011. And it's women across all areas of life. And one of the things that we did was we put 2 indexes in the back of the book. One is alphabetical, and in the paperback version, there are birth and death dates for everyone for which it's appropriate. And there's a professions index. So if someone is working with a young woman who says, there's never been a woman governor, there's never been a woman architect, there's never been a woman television producer, there's never been a woman fill in the blank, whatever it is, you just go to the index at the back of the book.
And look for that field.
And you look for that field, and we have entrepreneurs, and we have educators, and we have abolitionists and suffragists, and we have governors,
Excellent.
And Nobel laureates, and artists, and television producers.
That makes it such a great reference for schools and libraries to have. I can't imagine any one of them shouldn't have it. You think that every school and library should have this book for a reference as well as on their coffee table, as you said.
Absolutely. And that's very important because finding these women is the difficult part. And once you have this book in your hands, you do know the early golfers and the early educators and the early business executives. And by the way, our first female Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, wrote the foreword
Oh, marvelous.
to our book.
And did she wear her pin?
Actually, I've seen the museum display of her pins. I'm sure she's wearing a pin.
At any given moment.
At any given moment. The picture that we used actually has her sort of in profile for the forward, so I will have to look, actually, to see which pin she's wearing in that
That'll
profile.
be interesting. Have you seen the book that we have for the state of Maryland on women of achievement in Maryland history?
I don't think I've seen that one
And we'll
yet.
have to share that with you as well. And that was written through certain fields of endeavor. So there's a section that deals with civil rights, education, the arts, different areas divided that way, and has some narrative about each of those fields of endeavor or social and political achievements, and then women who were achievers in those areas.
Oh, that's
So
a wonderful way to break it out.
Yes, I think you'll enjoy that too. We'll make sure you get that.
Perfect. That's wonderful.
And we have just so much enjoyed talking with you. We're going to take a little break. Welcome back, everybody. We are very pleased again to be speaking with Jill Tietjen from the National Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls, New York, and the author of her story. We really would like everyone who's watching to know how they can get copies of your book. Can you let us know? Let them know?
Absolutely. The website is www.herstoryatimeline.com. The book is available online. The book is available at bookstores. I would like to tell you that on the website, we do have information on how to contact us as speakers. I will speak anywhere, actually, in the country that I'm invited. There are book club discussion guidelines online. There are 5 different book club discussion guidelines there. We also have some curriculum developed so that people can download information, including
Excellent.
PowerPoint presentations and study guides. There are also flashcards for younger people so that they can learn about women's accomplishments in the same kind of format as the book, which is a picture and a very little brief information,
Yeah.
so that they can learn about these women and those women can become more second nature
Yeah.
to them. And my email address is Jill, Jill.
I'll remember that.
You will. At herstoryatimeline.com.
Okay, we'll look forward to that. And we also look forward to a very long association between the National Women's Hall of Fame and the Maryland Women's Hall of Fame and the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. And we look forward to having you back for an actual gathering specifically to talk about your book.
I would love to do that. I think it's very important. One of the things I was going to tell you that Madeleine Albright said, and that is, there is a special place in hell for women who do not help other women. And so it's very important for the halls to work together. It's
Absolutely.
very important for all of us to work together.
Yes, and we thank you for that, and we look forward to a long partnership.
I look forward to it as well.
We thank you for being here with us today, and we look forward to your return to Maryland in the near future. Thank you for all the advocacy and writing that you've done to really recognize and preserve these stories of the contributions of such wonderful women. Did I say goodbye?
Well, okay, I got
I to the camera.
And action.
So that's it today for Her Story. We've been enhanced by having Jill Tietjen with us because she really knows about her story, and we hope you'll join us next time. So what are we going to do for next time? Talk
And we're
about...
cut-
we should-